First and Cam, we are back with our Week 10 reaction episode this Monday. Thank you guys for tuning in and thank you guys for showing out on all social media platforms. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our channel. Follow us on TikTok as well as we continue to create some buzz over there. My co-host Evan has been on fire lately with his bets, so tune into those. We put those out about a couple times a week. I've been on a pretty decent run lately, calling some good games last weekend. Georgia Tech let me down against NC State. We will cover that briefly when we talk about the ACC standings. A lot's happened. We're almost into week 11 of college football. It's been a major storyline every single weekend. Coaches are getting fired. We love that. Transfer portal will continue to be hot. Guys are starting to sit out and not redshirt. All kinds of things are happening. But let's start with the AP poll. The top two spots, or the top four spots, really. What is it? The top seven really kind of all stayed the same with Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, Bama, Georgia, Oregon, and Ole Miss. And then we have a highly touted matchup between BYU and Texas Tech coming up this weekend. Those teams sit at the 8 and 9 spot, respectively. Notre Dame finds their way back inside the top 10. Doesn't really surprise me at all. They've been putting belt to ass every single weekend. Oklahoma in that number 11 spot. They had a big win over Tennessee. I actually did not see that one coming last weekend. Virginia climbing up those rankings at number 12. They are a pretty decent football team. As we continue to see Miami struggle, we'll talk about that too. Texas jumping back in the mix in the SEC title contention at number 13. Louisville, another ACC program in the top 15. They're sitting at 14. Vanderbilt falls to 15 after the loss to Texas. Georgia Tech takes a huge fall to number 16 after that loss to NC State. Then you have Utah, Miami, Mizzou still stuck in that 19 spot. Seems like they're going to get pigeonholed into that 19 to 15 range all season. USC had a big win this weekend. Michigan at 21, Memphis 22, Tennessee falls to 23, Washington at 24, and Cincinnati making their first appearance in the rankings this season at 25. Is there anything that surprises you with these rankings, and do you like them? It seems like the AP poll is doing a little bit better of a job
Yeah,
this
I
time
I
around.
like them. I think BYU being at 8 is great. I think they have basically done everything they can do to be ranked where they are. Went out, is the point. So I like that the AP is respecting that. I don't think they played a tougher schedule than the seven teams ahead of them. Maybe Ohio State, maybe, but outside of that, I really do appreciate where they are. Texas Tech at 9. This to me feels like if Texas Tech beats BYU, we're probably only going to get one Big 12 school in. Um,
Mm.
if BYU wins, then like that would be a huge wrench. I don't think anybody would see coming. I have a bone to pick with Virginia being 12 behind Oklahoma and Notre Dame. This is a
Mm.
one-loss team leading their conference. Uh, in my and they beat number 14 Louisville, which in my opinion is a better win than Notre Dame has and probably is a better win than what Oklahoma has so far. They beat a Tennessee team that's just okay. So I think Virginia should be at that 10 spot. I think they should be, right there for the ACC. I think Louisville should be ahead of Texas. Same deal there. Maybe even ahead of Oklahoma. That's really where I have a bone to pick is the ACC for as competitive as it's been this year isn't really getting the respect. They're kind of treated the same way the Big 12 is, but the Big 12 is being treated, in my opinion, probably their weight a little bit heavier. So I'm not sure what the difference is between ACC and Big 12, but I would like to see Virginia at 12 and Louisville, who's at 14 right now, probably be two spots ahead each. So Virginia at 10, where Notre Dame is, and then Louisville at 12. And I'd probably go Notre Dame at 11, Oklahoma at 12, and then Texas at like 14 or whatever the case would be. So that's really my only spot there. I think Mizzou has a humongous chance this coming weekend
Yeah.
to get on top of A&M. That'd be awesome for them. Miami being number 18. The only reason they're 18 is because they beat Notre Dame. That's like the only reason. Florida State's not very good. Miami, you can make the case Miami deserves to be unranked with just the way they've been playing the past few weeks. So that brand, that logo's hanging on there. USC at 20 is cool. I'm not sure what Michigan has done to be ranked 21, but that's fine. Memphis is cool. Washington's fine. Cincinnati, they're sneakily in the run to make the playoff too. So I would keep an eye on them.
I don't really mind these rankings that much. I will say Virginia at 12 is one of those situations. I know Josh Pate was talking about this as well, is if BYU were to lose against Texas Tech, I think they would probably fall out of the top 17 to 18 spots just because of the strength of schedule. And look at Virginia kind of the same way, where I think if they were to lose in the ACC at some point, they'd probably knock themselves out of the title contention. I think with the Big 12 possibly only getting one team, the ACC looks like it could almost get three. And so I don't really know how those ACC teams match up with Big Ten and SEC because I know that the Big Ten winner and a Big Ten championship winner and loser will get in. The SEC championship winner and loser will definitely be getting in. So those four spots will already be taken. After that, the ACC is really tight, though. I mean, if you're looking at Virginia, Louisville, Georgia Tech, who I still believe in, they played in a really good game against NC State. They allowed NC State to score a lot of points, which I did not like and did not see coming. And then Miami, who has been really struggling the past three games. We'll talk about them too. I don't necessarily know what's happening with Carson Beck. He's got six INTs in the last three games. It kind of seems like this is the reason why a lot of Georgia fans were able or happy to see him go. Mizzou, if they can beat A&M, I think they jump right back into that SEC title contention with as how good as we think that A&M is this year. I don't have a problem with Georgia and Oregon staying at 5 and 6. Ole Miss is going to continue to kind of loom around, and I think if they went out, they don't even need to make it to the SEC title game to make it in and have a good ranking. But you talk about Washington being in the Big Ten, and Washington and USC 24-20. I don't know if they necessarily have a shot at the Big Ten title game, considering Ohio State and Indiana are most likely going to win out. And then the Big 12, you've got Utah, who's sitting there at 17. They're a good football team. I think there's no doubt about that. I think Utah is better than BYU, even though they did lose to them. I think that's BYU's only good win of the season. I do think if Utah and BYU were to play again, that Utah would win. And then Notre Dame, who obviously is not in the conference, I think they're always just going to get some love from the committee because of who they are. And they still are a good football team. I really wasn't a believer in the first half of the season, but the way that they've been winning and how impressive it has looked, that I guess I can kind of agree with that. But looking at conference standings, you look at the SEC, you've got A&M, Bama, Ole Miss, Georgia in that top four. All those teams still have a case to make it. Oklahoma and Texas are still sitting there right behind them. Vanderbilt can still get in there as well. So I look at the SEC as there's probably six teams that could win the SEC title. The Big Ten, I look at there only being two. And then in the Big 12, I would probably say there's only really and I would say there's probably two teams that can win at Texas Tech, and then between BYU and Utah, those are the only two teams. So the the standings to me they look okay. I'm not going to say that they're perfect, but with what the AP poll has been able to work with, I think they're showing love to these teams that are surprisingly good. Like you got Virginia, I think they're a good story, probably a better story than they are a team. Sitting there at number 12 because they're not better than Texas. They're not better than Oklahoma. They probably aren't better than Vanderbilt, but with these late losses, you know how the committee does. They're gonna make a story out of nothing if they can. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And
go ahead.
I looking at the AP poll, in my opinion, is a really poor reflection of what the playoff is going to look like. I've always had an issue with this because it's not their job to make playoffs, but let's say Louisville is a one-loss team, Virginia is a one-loss team, Georgia Tech's a one-loss team. Well, one of those teams is going to win in the ACC championship, and the other team's probably going to get in. And then if you have an 11-1 team or 10-1, or yeah, 11-1 team sitting there, let's say it's Louisville doesn't get into the championship. It's like, are you going to leave them out? And then I'm looking at the Big 12 as well. Texas Tech has one loss right now. BYU, I assume, are going to get beat this weekend by Texas Tech, so they'll be a one-loss team too. Cincinnati, I believe, let me check Cincinnati. I think they're a one-loss team as well.
Mm,
And so if you look at that, like, how do you do that? Are they going to not make it as well, being a one-loss team? Does a one-loss Big 12 team not get in over a two-loss SEC team? Like, is that the road we want to play on? So this is the only thing about the AP is I don't think it's a true reflection of who's going to make the playoff, which we will get the playoff rankings, but I think it comes down to conference championship Saturday and
yeah,
who doesn't make it, who has one or two losses, and then like I'm looking at Ole Miss as an example. They go, let's say they end up with just one loss, but it's Alabama versus Georgia in the championship. Well, they're going to get in. But
right.
then if you look at Oklahoma has what two losses I think so far. Texas is
Mhm.
a two-loss team. Vandy's now a two-loss team as well. Like there's an argument that all of those teams could get in also. And so there's just the AP poll is great. It's good for rankings. But when I look at the playoff picture, there are so many more parts to it that the AP just can't cover that it's really hard to look at who's going to get in and who's not. For all we know, Mizzou it has a clear path to the playoff if they win out. And that's the case for a lot of these schools on this list.
Let's jump into Hugh Freeze being fired at Auburn because I feel like Hugh Freeze, the writing was on the wall for a while that Auburn needs to be a team, be a program that competes. And for a very
Mhm.
long time now, Auburn's just kind of been very in the middle of the SEC. The expectations for them haven't even been very high. I don't even think they've been a preseason SEC title game like prediction from any analyst that we've ever watched.
Mm-mm.
And so for them to pay this buyout to Hugh Freeze and then kind of just sit there, like they're not the number one option for any of the candidates that we can name. Because would guarantee that Penn State, Florida, we'll see what happens in Florida State, LSU, like Auburn sits behind all of those schools. And so do they end up with the guy that they truly want, or are they just a kind of a consolation prize while this season kind of goes on? Because we talk about Summerall, he's kind of a candidate for all of these jobs. Brent Key, another guy who's a candidate for all of the jobs. But these guys can only go to one school, and you only have so much time to put together a roster that these teams actually want. Who else is in there? Eli Drinkwitz. I
Yeah.
think as time goes on, it seems like Drinkwitz might be just the best fit for Mizzou. I don't know if the grass is greener on the other side than him. Lane Kiffin, obviously, another guy who's popped up in every single coaching vacancy that there is possible. He even might be, he even might become a little bit overrated at this point as far as what he's actually able to do versus what's on paper. He
Mhm.
still has never won a natty. I think a lot of people like the environment and the culture that he creates, but is that a championship culture? I'm not sure yet. He'll have to prove it to us. I don't think it's going to happen at Ole Miss. So maybe his championship expectations only fall when he goes to a Florida or an LSU. I think Ole Miss is a good team, but I don't think. I mean, we've seen them play in person. We say all the time that they just aren't a cut above the rest, as maybe some would imagine. But the Auburn job to me is supposed to be a premier job, and it just doesn't feel like it. And why is that?
Well, I think there are a lot of pieces to it, but I think the expectation at Auburn has never been, like you said, nobody's picked them to win the conference. Nobody's picked them to win a national championship for a long time. I mean, the best Auburn team we've ever seen is that Cam Newton team. Like
Right.
that was, and that might be one, and that could have been one of just the best teams in college football potentially ever. Not necessarily roster, but just what that moment was. But I mean, ever since then, it's kind of like we got our national championship, we beat up on Alabama, like that was cool for a while. And I know they went back to a national championship a couple of years later, but they didn't have a chance. I don't know if it's expectations. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It feels like a school that's just in the shadow of the SEC. It feels like they're a part of it, but they're not like a name brand that you'd consider to
They
again win
truly
out or do
feel
anything.
like the little brother to Alabama.
No,
That just,
100%.
yeah, this
And,
point.
and that's the right way to look at it. Here's my question though is so you start looking at these jobs and you wonder where do these coaches actually want to go? Yes, we have hot boards. Yes, we've got like Pete Nako's like saying, "Oh, this coach is on the top of this list and that coach is on this list." But if you really think about it, these coaching jobs come down to so much more than just like who is available and who wants to get paid the most. As an example, I look at the LSU job. Somehow, the governor of the state is involved in this.
Right.
The AD got fired. The interim president said making the playoff is the standard. Okay. Well, that LSU offense doesn't have the roster to make the playoff right now. So if you take that job and you assume you're probably going to lose all of these defensive players that you paid a lot of money for, not getting Bryce Underwood, by the way, you're looking at a roster that's going to take a year, maybe two, to get back on track. So if you take that job, you have sky high expectations. You're going to have a roster that can't meet that, and hopefully you have the NIL budget to get the players you need. You probably won't, but hopefully you do. So expectations up here, which you can probably produce is down here. They're thinking 11 wins, 10 wins. You're probably going to get 7 or 8, like at best. And so is LSU a better job than Auburn? Where if you go to Auburn, like winning 8 games 9 games would be a really good feat. And like, yeah, winning an SEC game or 2 or 3 in the year would be an awesome accomplishment. You look at like Florida. Florida would easily take, I think, a James Franklin who winning 10 games would be a wonderful experience for the Gator fans. So, and I look at Penn State as well. Penn State and LSU, in my opinion, probably have two of the most toxic expectations. Penn State, I don't know that that's a better job than Ohio State,
No,
USC, Oregon, Michigan. That's probably it for the Big Ten. So like
probably, yeah.
you're probably battling fifth, I think, in the Big Ten. And then you look at the SEC, and that job, the Penn State job, is not better than any of the schools that have jobs open in the SEC as well: Florida, Auburn, LSU. So, in my opinion, I'm just not really sure what to expect for Auburn. I think they're the team that could take the biggest chance on a coach, but they already took a G5 coach, being Hugh Freeze, and it didn't work out very well. So they're probably going to be the ones, same with Florida, who don't want to do the whole, like, let's take an up and coming coach and see if he can replicate his success here. I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't know who your coaching pool is. I think James Franklin down at Auburn would be a really good fit. That'd be my number one go-to. Like, let's just take the success you had up there, give you a easier recruiting bed, and then give you the opportunity to really win some games. And by the way, if you win 9 games, like, you're going to be a hero until you win a national championship.
That's true, because right now they're sitting at 1-5 in the SEC, and so I think a bunch of Auburn fans really just want to get back to competing in the SEC. They've been an afterthought. You've got Mississippi State's higher on the rankings, Kentucky higher in the rankings, Mizzou, Vanderbilt. Like, these are schools that Auburn is usually better than. I mean, the only team that doesn't have an SEC win right now is Arkansas, sitting at 0-5 and 2-7 on the year. Auburn is 4-5. They've had some games that could have gone either way. You never really know how the season goes if they get some of those calls back, or certain things happen in a one-score game. But my just overall perception of Auburn at this point is just kind of B or C tier. If you're talking about a national stage, it's definitely a C tier team. In the SEC, it's not in the top tier. I would say that right now, I hate to say it, but not really hate to say it, but Mizzou is probably a solidified 100% better job than Auburn right now, just where everything is sitting at. And it's crazy to say, considering they share a state with Alabama and that same recruiting zone. But Florida is obviously a better job. Vanderbilt isn't a better job, but if this momentum continues for the next 2 years, then that's going to become a better job. Obviously, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Florida. I mean, Mississippi State, who's usually an afterthought in the SEC, they've been competing really well, and they're 5-4. They're over 500. So there's a lot that's going on in the SEC outside of Auburn, and you see these teams. It's kind of like me rooting for the Jets in the NFL. Auburn is not that much of a laughing stock, but you see these teams around you get so much better in a short span of time. I mean, we were just sitting here laughing at the Patriots. Now the Patriots are 7-2, and they're the number one seed in the AFC East, and potentially could be a top seed in the AFC playoffs. You watch, being a Jets fan, you watch the Commanders get Jaden Daniels and turn their whole franchise around. We were literally watching the Giants and the Panthers. I mean, the Panthers are 5-4 now. The Giants look like they've got it together a little bit. They've had some injuries not go their way. I think if they have Malik Neighbors and Cam Scatterwood, they would probably be okay. I mean, you look around the league and teams improve really, really fast. And I think that's really what's going to happen in college football. You see Mizzou improve. You've seen Vanderbilt get a couple players and improve. Texas A&M, for all it's worth, I mean, they haven't really been relevant since Manziel left. They've had some recruits and some guys come here and there, but they haven't been a relevant team in almost a decade. And then South Carolina, who's having a really struggling season. Florida, really struggling, but still better than Auburn. It's kind of a weird spot to be in. And if you take that job, what are those expectations? Like you said, 8-9 wins. I guess right now they would be happy with that. But I think if you're talking about just competing in the SEC in general, you look at 8 or 9 wins, like, that's never going to win the SEC. But if they can't
Yeah,
ever get there, then I mean, what is there to
but
what is there to brag about?
8 or 9 wins probably gets you an upset in the SEC. 8 or 9 wins gets you
Probably a couple upsets.
probably, maybe it gets you a top 10 recruiting class. Maybe it gets you a couple transfer portal guys. You said something about Mizzou being a better spot than Auburn. I think if both those jobs were wide open, the Auburn job would command a lot more attention than the Mizzou one. I think Mizzou recruiting in the SEC has a hand behind their back because they're the most northern team. And so it's cold. It's not the pageantry is not the same. The atmosphere is not the same. The coach is great, but like it's not an SEC feel. It's becoming that way, but it's not there yet. But I do look at so Texas A&M, like you mentioned, teams that have turned it around. Indiana, obviously with Signetti. I'll say Alabama, going from Nick Saban to any coach and then sustaining this level of success, which is probably going to be 9 wins and then probably 10 wins, maybe 11 wins this season, is hyper impressive for Kalen DeBoer. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, like that job, that school has never been one that you're like national championship potentially.
Well,
And this
Lane
year,
Kiffin was kind of a journeyman coach. He's been
yeah,
in the NFL. He's struggled. We've kind of seen his whole career play out in front of us. He was never a guy that national media took serious until he started winning at Ole Miss, to be honest, or really when
correct.
he got to Bama and was a part of that great coaching realm, and then he branched off into his own.
Well, you have that. You have Joey McGuire at Texas Tech. Like that is another, and they have a huge, infusion of cash there. But there are Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State from taking
Mhm.
over from Herm Edwards. Like you have so many examples of coaches who can come in and turn the ship around pretty fast. Is it doable in the SEC? Yeah, I think so. It starts with a veteran quarterback, starts with a good offense, starts with at least enough pieces on defense that you can do something with. It takes probably a little bit of a break on your schedule. You need a couple, like you hopefully you don't have, I guess next year would be great to have LSU, Florida, Texas. But like next year would be the year that you want to have a heavy name branded schedule because a lot of those schools are going to be in turmoil, I think, either about to fire the coach or have fired the coach and now they have a new coach in the seat. So I don't know. I think Auburn is a really good spot. I think if you're let's say you're Marcus Freeman and you're weighing your options, like do I stay at Notre Dame? Do I go to LSU? But if you go to LSU, like you've got stupid high standards that you have to meet that, by the way, nobody has met in a long time. Like
Right.
to be fair, nobody's met those standards in a long time. So you have that. Like Auburn throws you some money. It's like, well, I can just go do this at Auburn and I'd be celebrated like a hero. I'd be the best coach there in a very long time.
Mhm.
So like I don't know. I would love to see James Franklin at Auburn. That would just be kind of my cup of tea. I think I would root for Auburn if that was the case. But yeah, I don't know. Firing Hugh Freeze was probably a season too late. I think there's a stat out there that he's had, I think 9 seasons where he's had over 25 turnovers. His offense has had 25 turnovers or more. And you look at that and you go, well, how the hell? And so I think his offense, his scheme, his philosophy just isn't a great fit for the SEC. The
Mhm.
RPO is just hard to execute. And so we'll see where Hugh leads or lands. But this Auburn job, I think, goes to a coach like a Jeff Brom potentially who can do something dangerous with it and make them just a really good football team. And then you get a break and maybe you're an 11-win team and you're hosting a playoff game. Like that doesn't seem far fetched for Auburn.
No, yeah, you make a good point. Let's jump into the big SEC matchup of the weekend, Texas versus Vanderbilt. I really didn't see this one coming, and I think it's more of a surprise of how well Arch Manning played, 25 of 33, 328 yards, 3 touchdowns, and their offensive line was improved. I read that, Texas moved their starting senior center Cole Hudson to left guard, replacing a struggling freshman Nick Brooks. They put in a junior at center, and they allowed zero sacks and just one tackle for loss. And Vanderbilt, who was coming into this week 26th in pressure rate. And so I, for me, being an ex quarterback, the first thing that's going to make you really comfortable is not seeing guys flying in your face or coming open free, waiting to sack you or jump at your legs. And I think with Arch Manning, him getting a little bit more comfortable, and I was just looking at pictures of him from when he first got to Texas. Now he's put on a lot of weight. He's put on some muscle mass, and he looks just a little bit more filled out, like how a starting quarterback should. And he's been steadily improving. You've been on the brighter side, the optimistic side of Arch Manning, and just how he is with his physical tools, and how a quarterback like that is always probably gonna succeed in college. Kind of just go in and expand on that more because I know that you've been on the optimistic side about Arch Manning.
He has shown leaps and bounds. He didn't get any favors starting with Ohio State
Mhm.
and then playing cupcakes. Like I think he's one of those guys where it just takes time. You're the starting quarterback. I think there's a lot of pressure on him to be great, and he knows that. You're signing NIL deals. You got commercials before you've really played a snap for the school a meaningful one. And so I think it takes time. You have pressure, you've got learning how to be a great leader consistently, and then you've got playing at a school that's expecting you to be great. But here's a opposite fact. It's Arch, and then we can juxtapose this with Carson Beck because they're kind of opposite in this way. So you look at Texas, and when they struggle on offense, and these last 2 weeks are really key, but when they struggle on offense, in my opinion, they don't let Arch throw the ball enough. Texas really doesn't have a great run game. Maybe they fool people by thinking they do because of name brand. You should have a good run game, but they don't.
Right.
So against Kentucky, Arch threw the ball 27 times. Kind of a lot, but not as much as you would think. Ended up with 132 passing yards, and they barely won that game. It was raining. It was kind of a weird spot. Not a big deal. You go to the Mississippi State game, and he didn't even play in overtime, so his stats could have been even higher. He threw the ball 46 times against Mississippi State. 346 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 INT. Probably would have had a fourth passing touchdown had he not gotten hurt. Then we go to this Vandy game, and he has 38 passing attempts. And it kind of feels like for 365 yards and 3 touchdowns, I'm sorry, he had 33 passing attempts, 328 yards, 3 touchdowns. It feels like the more times he gets to throw the football, the more confident he gets. The more times he gets to go back, drop back, and scan the field, the more comfortable he is as a quarterback. If you flip that over to the Miami side, and we can get to them dropping another game, the more times Miami asks Carson Beck to throw the football, the worse their offense is. And there's a 3 game span we can look at, and I can show you that here in a moment. But to me, it feels like Arch is getting more comfortable. It feels like when Sark trusts him, he also gets a little more confidence. And then he's just ripping it. And I don't believe Texas has a great offensive line. They obviously don't have a great run game at all. Against Vanderbilt, Wisner had 18 carries for 75 yards. So like they're not really moving the ball on the ground at all. And so for Arch to be this comfortable and also have this production against, in my opinion, what was probably a playoff elimination game for them is big time. So I think he's going to continue to ascend. There's probably some notes on Vanderbilt where that offense has probably been figured out a little bit. They did score 21 in the fourth quarter, but it's like the gimmicky football. I mean, they were blanked in the first quarter, blanked in the third quarter, and then they came back and made it interesting. But there's a part of me that thinks that Arch, like if he were to come out, he might be like the number 1 pick taken, and we'd probably see the same progression in the NFL. Not so good at first, and then he picks it up. I mean, he's 6'5", he's fast, he's physical, he's got a big arm. Like that's going to work out a lot of times. Can he make the reads? It's starting to feel like he can, and that's really exciting for Texas fans.
Well, we want to compare Carson Beck and Arch Manning. I think it's a really good comparison. I also want to compare the schemes because you talk about the first play of the game for Texas, which is a bubble route to Wingo, and he takes it 75 yards. I mean, that's just pure speed and athleticism from Wingo. But then I'm watching the game, and then I'm watching Miami, and I'm like, it seems like Carson Beck would be better off in Texas scheme passing the ball. And you would think a guy with the arm talent of Arch Manning would be better fit at somewhere like Miami, how they're calling plays. Miami's got Malachi Tony. They've got receivers for days and athletes for days over there. But it seems like if those guys were to flip-flop offensive schemes, I feel like Carson Beck would be better with Texas with the quick action, the motion, the bubble routes, the receivers who make plays after the catch. And then you've got Miami with a good offensive line Carson Beck is really not even about him getting pressured. It's just about bad decision making. And I think Arch Manning, as much crap as we've given him, I don't really think his decision making is all that bad. And he sees the field well, like you said, and he's just getting slowly better and better. Where I feel like Carson Beck is kind of regressing. I don't know if he's pressing. I don't know if the offense has just been kind of getting figured out a little bit. But you look at the regression and progression of these guys where we started at the beginning of the year, it's pretty insane to me. And I don't know what Arch's draft stock looks like right now. I feel like him in a pro day setting or a combine setting against some of the quarterbacks that would be coming out this year, that he would look just as good, if not better, than a Fernando Mendoza or, I mean, a Nussmeier or somebody like that. Texas is really just hitting their stride as a team, I think. That defense has always been really good. Texas only punted the ball 1 time against Vanderbilt. So the offense is definitely moving the ball. The defense is always going to come to play. Vanderbilt came to the game averaging 6.2 rush yards per carry, and Texas limited them to 2.4. And so they had 10 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. Vanderbilt had only given up 7 sacks all season. So I think it's one of those cases where Vanderbilt hadn't seen speed like that coming off the edge and at linebacker versus what they've been looking at against in the SEC, and they've just been able to handle it. they also had been played a gauntlet of like a middle stretch of their season, so they were just they were bound to have to work for this game. Texas was favored, so even Vegas kind of knew that this was kind of a trap for Vanderbilt to come in there, be the higher ranked team, but they've been kind of getting not beat up, but physically just kind of taking a toll on them with the games that they have been playing. I think that all kind of caught up to them, and I wouldn't be surprised if Vanderbilt has another close game or drops another one before the SEC title game.
Well, I mentioned this in kind of the short TikTok I put together when I bet Texas to win this game and they ended up covering. Is you look at where Vandy has played some of their games. So they played on the road at Alabama, lost by 16 points, and that game was probably a bigger deficit than what that showed. October 4th, they had a bye week. Then they hosted LSU at home. Then they hosted Mizzou at home. And it felt like in that Mizzou game, Mizzou had done something with their front, with the way they were blitzing and the way they were attacking the run of Vanderbilt's that they kind of solved what Vanderbilt tries to do on offense. And then Vandy goes on the road to Texas. Now, Texas hadn't had a home game in like a month.
They said like 42 days or something like that.
Something
Yeah.
insane, which like Mizzou like only had home games the first like 7 games, something crazy. So it's just weird how the schedule goes. But yeah, Texas hadn't had a home game in a long time, and so they get to go home. Vandy has to go on the road, and then you've played a physical LSU team. You played probably a more physical game against Mizzou. That was just a sludge fest, and so you have that dynamic working against you. Then I think you have a confidence building Texas offense that I think is finding their stride, which is we're going to have our athletes touch the ball a lot, make big plays, and then we need to ask Arch to throw like medium, and then he can hit a couple of deep balls as time goes on. So, and the one thing about going back to Arch versus Carson Beck, because I think Carson Beck would work just about anywhere. I think Miami asked him to do way too much the same way they did for Cam Ward. Just like, Mario, what are you doing? We can get to him too. He's on the hot seat for me. I do not like what Mario Cristobal's been putting together at Miami, but that's a separate, topic we'll get to. Texas competition has picked up. Who they have played has actually picked up recently. Who Miami's played has gone down dramatically. Like their competition has gone down from playing Notre Dame and then you're playing FSU and those are humongous games to playing Louisville, like to playing Stanford, to playing SMU. It's like those are huge letdowns for your roster trying to play meaningful football, and you somehow lose two of those. Like so, I'm going to jump over to Carson Beck for just a second, since we're here. Looking at the Louisville game, he has 4 INTs, of course. They're on, and by the way, that game's at home, which is just nuts. He throws the ball 35 times. All right, so he throws the ball 35 times, 271, 4 INTs. Not all those INTs were completely on him. I would assume 2 of those were, 2 of those weren't, but that's just how it goes. That's how the stats go. Then they host Stanford. He throws the ball 28 times. Mark Fletcher, the running back, has 23 carries against Stanford, 106 yards, 3 touchdowns, 8 carries against Louisville. So we ask Carson Beck to do way too much against Louisville. They lose. We don't ask Mark Fletcher to do enough. Then we have Miami. They go and they play SMU. And here we go again. Carson Beck, 38 attempts, 2 INTs. Mark Fletcher, only 16 carries for 84 yards. And so, in my opinion, it just feels like Miami, they have an identity and they secretly want to use all these weapons at wide receiver. Daniels, they've got Malachi Tony. It's like, buddy, you've got Mark Fletcher as your running back. Offensive line can clearly get a push. That's what you need to be leaning on. Don't make Carson Beck throw the ball 30 times. That's not going to lead to good decisions. It's just not going to work. That's how college football is. And so unless you got a freak of a quarterback like Arch Manning, for some reason he throws the ball 30 times and he's freaking elite, it doesn't work that way. So I don't know if I put all this on Carson Beck. If I'm drafting him, I'm like, yeah, he's turnover prone, but like what quarterback who's really good isn't? Also, like this team, clearly the coach that has no clue as to how to put together a game plan that can solve for his quarterback being inconsistent. And that's why Miami finds himself where they should be one of the best teams in the country. And now they're sitting there at 18 with 2 losses already. It's like, bro, like, what are you doing? So,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, Miami, I mean, you got Pittsburgh, who is 3rd in the ACC right now. They're 5-1. Miami is 2-2 in the ACC. So right now they'd be completely out of the ACC championship. And if Virginia and Georgia Tech run the table, they're both 8-1, 5-0, and 5-1 in the conference. Miami, there's a chance that Miami went from preseason top 10 to, oh wow, this is actually a really good story. Oh wow, they're 5-0. This is a real team to they're not even going to make it to the ACC championship. So the drop off, I think that alone puts Cristobal on in a hot seat. After the first month of the season, you would have thought he might have saved his job and was maybe even looking for an extension. But now I think you have to recalibrate and think about some things because he's clearly not the guy for this job. If this is all the talent that they have on their team, I'm not saying they call lightning in a bottle, but you've got Malachi Tony, who's one of the better true freshmen we've ever seen. You're paying this quarterback all of this money. You've got a defense who, in the first month of the season, was great, and now it seems like they just get out schemed and out coached every single possession. And they're sitting at 6-2, which doesn't seem like a terrible record, but if you look at the rest of the ACC, it's just not going to cut it. And if they don't make it to the ACC title game, I think his job has to be on the line, considering the schools that have fired their coach and the candidates that we think are going to be available for that job. Because I mean, we talk about Penn State, Florida, LSU, whatever. If the Miami job is open, I can guarantee you there's at least 3 or 4 elite coaches that are waiting to take that job and they're waiting to run with it. So he has to be careful with the rest of this season. What's the rest of their schedule? Because
They host Syracuse this weekend.
yeah, see,
They have no more bye weeks, by the way. Then
right,
they host NC State, which is scary. They go to Virginia Tech 3 weeks from now,
yeah,
warm weather team in a cold weather environment, and then they go to Pittsburgh.
right.
So there is a humongous chance this ends up being a 5-loss team. And that wouldn't be out of the picture.
Yeah, no, because NC State, the way that they're playing against Georgia Tech, I think they have a lot of momentum. Syracuse, that spread is really high. I think the spread was like 17 or 20 points. I think that Syracuse has a chance to even cover that. And then you talk about Pittsburgh, that last game of the season. That's not a bad team with a new quarterback that's young and a team that's resurging and that's gonna probably be a preseason ranking in 26. It's looking really dark in Miami. I don't know how they got to this point, but and I hate to put it all on Carson Beck because it's really not all on him. But the coach and the QB combination, it's not working, and I see Cristobal being on the hot seat at the very end of the season.
I think so. I think that the Miami job has a lot of guys that would take it because it could be one of those where it's kind of a diamond in the rough. In my opinion, there might not be a better ACC job than Miami. Maybe Florida State, but in that you see how that's going. So you would take over what I think is an elite place to recruit, and then obviously coach. You're in Miami, which couldn't be any better than that. You don't play a hefty, hard schedule. Any of your out of conference games might be big ones, but you just play teams that you're going to get tested against and you can learn. And then you've got in their case, the back half or the front half could be all cupcakes, and so you should be padding stats, padding wins. I look at a Manny Diaz of Duke could be a candidate for that Miami job. There are a lot of guys where you look at kind of where they're sitting. Miami's a big upgrade. Cristobal came from Oregon, and he kind of had the same thing going. Good recruiter, preseason national champion the way he would recruit. But then on the field, it's like, holy hell, every once in a while they lose a game and you're like, what happened? There was a game 2 years ago. Miami ran the ball. They should have taken a knee. They didn't.
Yeah, that the
Running back
game against
I don't
what was
remember who it
that?
was against.
That's
Maybe it was,
against Georgia Tech.
oh my gosh. I'm like, what is going on? So fumble, they go down, score game. All right. It's like, how do you collapse like that? So he has this thing about him where it's like he does all the things well off season, and then even in the big games, it feels like he knows exactly what to do. But then he takes his foot off the gas. His players do the same thing, and all of a sudden they're sitting here ranked 18th when they should be the number 3 or 4 ranked team in the country. They don't play anybody that has a roster anywhere near what they have, yet somehow they play down below. And by the way, they're playing Stanford. Stanford had the lead in the first half. So that Stanford game, the second half they turned up. That first half was ugly. So something about Mario Cristobal and the way that he coaches is just he's Mr. Letdown himself. I don't know what it is. He's probably not on the hot seat to close this year out unless they end up losing 2 more games, which I think is very, very possible with
Right.
Virginia Tech. That being on the road in Blacksburg, and then you have to go to Pittsburgh and play outside. I don't like that dynamic at all. And there are no more bye weeks. So they're playing 7 weeks in a row. So that last game, you could just be running on fumes. You probably have injuries coming up with these next couple of games. I don't hope anybody does get injured, but that's the possibility. That's kind of the reality where we sit. So I don't know. I don't know what Cristobal has up his sleeve, what this team can do. Carson Beck needs to play a lot better, that's for sure. But they also need to feed the running backs a lot more. And if they can do those things, they'll win. If they can't do those things, then they'll lose. He'll be out of a job, and this will be one of those another job that'll be wide open. And you probably have a roster that can get picked from pretty easily too. So
Right.
they have to be careful.
He signed a 10-year, $80 million deal in December of 2021. Can you guess what his potential buyout could be?
I can't guess, but if I had to put a number to it, I'm going to say 46.
Okay, I will raise you $61 million buyout for Mario
Oh,
Cristobal. So I think they're kind of trapped at this point. And then you talk about the potential jobs that could come into to Miami. I mean, Brent Key, you said Diaz. These are ACC guys. So with staying within the conference, I mean, their best candidates damn near come from their same conference. So that's kind of scary as well. That the familiarity with the recruiting and just kind of the time of what's happened from Duke starting off the season really poorly to kind of picking up play and Miami just kind of doing the complete opposite of that. I mean, Georgia Tech is never supposed to be better than Miami for an entire season, and that's kind of what's been happening.
nor Florida State. And
Right.
and by the way, if that Miami job comes open, it'd be beneath Auburn, I think. Like you have to look at the resources. You have to
Mhm.
look at how they don't even have their own football stadium. Really, you have to look at a lot of key pieces. Like that Miami job would be coveted, but that would be a G5 job. That would be your Summeralls, your Golishes, your Ryan Silverfield at Memphis. Like those guys would be like eligible, I think, to take that job. And then you're playing with who knows what. And I don't think the school is going to even be able to buy him out. But
Right.
gosh, I don't love the situation Miami finds himself, and their schedule does not give them good odds to win out. I think they have another loss. They could have two more coming their way.
That's a great point. So let's jump into the Heisman odds really quick because it's just been a quarterback race for the entire year. Seems like what this is award is probably always gonna turn into. I wish they gave running backs and receivers a chance, but right now Julian Sayin sits at the top of the Heisman trophy odds at plus 175. Fernando Mendoza to plus 220. Ty Simpson has still kept himself afloat plus 340. And then it drops a little bit. Marcel Reed at plus 650. Gunnar Stockton 2,500. And then Jeremiah Smith is actually in there at plus 4,000. Now, he doesn't have a chance as long as Julian Sayin stays healthy. Do you think? I don't want to talk about Julian Sayin's NFL comp or what it is yet because I'm still very skeptical on what that would be. But do you have an issue with because Julian Sain's throwing to a core of receivers that ranks it could rank up there with some of the best that Ohio State's ever had. Do you take that anything? Do you take any of that away from him as far as what the Heisman means for him? I mean, you got great running backs, you got a great offensive line, and then you throw into some of the best receivers in the country. Do you agree that a quarterback that's throwing to guys like that should be at the top of the list, or how do you feel?
Well, I think that you can't punish a guy for having a great roster around him. Like even if a wide receiver wins the Heisman, buddy, your quarterback's elite, your offensive line's elite, and your defense must be pretty good because they're getting you the ball quite a bit. So, like, I think it really is a team sport trophy we're talking about. The thing I don't like about Julian Sand being the lead guy is who have they played? Like, what has he
Right.
done to deserve the Heisman Trophy? The best team he's played against was probably Texas. He was 13 for 20, 126 yards, and a touchdown. March Manning had better stats if you look at it across the board. They went to Washington, played
That's
well
the
there
second
too.
best team they've played is
So
Washington. Yeah.
it's like I don't know how to even evaluate what I'm looking at when I'm watching Julian Sand. He's very comfortable. The pass rush really doesn't get there. Penn State kind of gave them a fight a little bit in that third quarter, and it's like, all right, that could be something. But I don't know how to really even evaluate him. He's been very consistent. He's been very accurate. He's been very much on time. I think Brian Hartline has figured out how to use Julian to get the most out of him, and also
Mhm.
Carnell Tate, Jeremiah. So like the offense is very much complete. I can't take anything away from him. Something tells me that when the playoffs come, like I'm going to see a different version of him that I haven't seen before. And a matter of
Mhm.
fact, we won't have to wait that long. The Michigan game to me probably is one of those games where I don't know if he gets exposed, but it's one of those where he's not as efficient, he's not as accurate, and guys aren't getting the ball. And we're starting to see Ohio State kind of fissure at points they shouldn't be. And then maybe Michigan has a chance to squeeze another one out on Ryan Day. So who knows? But I'm just not sold on him yet. I like Fernando Mendoza. I think he has a much higher quality win on the road. I saw the way he played. And then Ty Simpson, I guess, has a chance if they continue to win out. Like Why not? Why can't he have it? Why
Right.
can't Trinidad Chambliss have it? Like I'm trying to figure out why he's not hiring. So there are some guys and Ole Miss doesn't have any difficult games they should struggle with left on the schedule. It's the SEC, so you never know. But Trinidad Chambliss could be right there. Now, if I look at the passing leaders, which I did have up recently, what's Fernando Mendoza's at 22. I think Arch is sitting at like 20. Four, I think it is. Yeah, there it is. I'm looking at some of these guys. I'm trying to figure out like Jade Maalva, if his team was any good, he could be right there. So I guess I'm just looking at this list thinking I'm not really sure who's going to win it out. I my hope would be that, well, in perfect world, we'd wait until basically the Final Four to figure out who the Heisman Trophy winner would be. That would put a
Yeah.
lot more into context. But Ohio State doesn't have anybody good on their schedule this year, so I don't know how tested Julian is. I don't know how good he is. I don't know how deserving he is yet.
Yeah. I mean, I like that point. Now, Marcel Reed, I feel like he should be getting a lot more love. You talk about a guy
Totally.
who's got some real weapons on the outside and some real weapons at running back. Just a well coached team. I wish he got some more love in his Heisman race. I think that the expectations for A&M were not supposed to be this season. Obviously, Indiana, they were not supposed to be top three, top two in the country at all, and they've surpassed all of our expectations. But I think we can credit that more to great coaching. I mean, he's been playing fantastic, but I think that the coaching has been the brighter spotlight over there. But Marcel Reed is a guy who I've been kind of silently rooting for all season just to play really well. He's only a sophomore, so he still has more time left. Gunnar Stockton, I think he can be in. I don't think he's ever been a serious candidate,
That's
but
not a bad one at all.
it's not terrible. I think that Georgia team is just kind of underrated at this point right now, which is super weird to think that because they're just usually never an afterthought, especially within their own conference, being right now the third highest ranked team in their conference. So I think that's very interesting that, Georgia could kind of walk their way into the SEC title game, and then next thing you know, Georgia's the SEC championship and SEC champion. And we're all looking like, well, where did this come from? And it's like they've been good all year. It's just Alabama hasn't lost since week one, and Texas A&M is still undefeated.
So let me read off to you. Let me get these pulled up here. We'll make this a little segment. I'll read them to you. You pick. All right. Let me read off to you these guys' stats in no order. I'm not going to say the name, and you tell me in order, or at least give me your top pick as to who would win the Heisman with the stats that they have. So, first one, we're going to go. This quarterback has a 61% completion percentage. He has 1,972 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 6 INTs, and then give me 1 second because I have to do the rushing as well. And then rushing, he has 5 rushing touchdowns and let's call it 150 rushing yards. That's QB1. You got those stats locked in?
Yeah.
All right. QB2, looking at his stats for the year, completion percentage, 70%, yards, 1776, 12 touchdowns, 2 INTs for the year. And then if I look at his rushing, he's got another 4 touchdowns to add to that. So 16 total touchdowns. QB3, looking at his stats, 60% completion percentage, 2,023 yards, 10 touchdowns, 2 INTs. And then he's got 4 rushing touchdowns. We'll add another 150 yards of rushing there for QB number 3. Here's number 4. He is sitting at 2,188 yards, 2,188 yards, 23 touchdowns, 3 INTs. And there's no rushing for him. And then our last quarterback 5, has 2,123 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, 4 INTs.
Yeah.
And I don't think any rushing. He has 2 rushing touchdowns. So technically 27 total touchdowns.
Yeah. Damn. Well, if we're talking about the list, number 4 and 5 would be my 1 and 2. If we're talking
Okay.
about just stats, number 4, that had to be Mendoza, right?
Number 4 is Julian Sand.
Julian Sand, wow.
Mendoza is the last one.
Okay, so that makes sense. Damn. Yeah, I would say it would definitely be 4. I mean, you wouldn't go any wrong with 4 or 5 being 1 or 2. I would take those two, just based off the stats alone. The low turnovers and the high completion percentage usually is a sign of a good team. We start talking about college football. Anything lower than 63, 64% is kind of like It's kind of like eyebrow raising. Like, all right, you either your team isn't very good or you're just not the quarterback that we think. And some of those really low completion percentages. And who were those quarterbacks, by the way?
So let me say this: for completion percentages, anything in my opinion below 60% is bad. That's just how I look at it. It's how I view it. Marcel Reed was number one, 61% completion
Mhm.
percentage, 1972 yards. His rushing is off the charts
Right.
too. He had 108 yards in one game against LSU, two touchdowns. So he's like just jumping off the charts. He's got 21, 22 total touchdowns. Gunnar
Yeah.
Stockton was number two. He's at 70% as well. He's
Mhm.
played really well. And then Trinidad Chambliss was at number three at 2,000 yards. Trinidad to me is really interesting because he could have, in my opinion, one of the best campaigns, and he also
He
missed two
should.
games.
He
He
should. Right.
if he played all his games, he would have the most passing yards on this list. And I don't think it'd be close. Like I don't think he'd even be like it would be him and then everybody else trying to catch up. He has 2,000 passing yards, and Julian Sand has 2,100. Fernando
Right.
Mendoza has 2,100 as well. So it's like the kid is and by far the toughest schedule of anybody on this list has played besides Marcel Reed. Him and Marcel Reed probably one for one. Maybe Gunnar Stockton too. But it's like this kid probably has deserved the Heisman more than anybody else. Plus the story, plus what this team is doing right now. It's hard for me to say anybody else is more deserving than him at this point.
Now that you make a good point because what the Heisman has gotten away from is the storyline and the totality of how this player got here, what's his background, what's he working with, what's the adversity, and it seems like the Heisman race has kind of just gotten away from that. I think that kind of started when Jaden Daniels won his Heisman.
Yeah.
It seemed that was just kind of weird. Caleb Williams also won a Heisman without really doing anything. I know he was an exciting player, but he didn't do much. He even got his jersey retired without even winning a Big Ten title game. That's a whole different discussion. But yeah, I mean, you go from D2 national title, we might add, and then you're playing in front of all these fans on the road, at home, in these big spots. I mean, if we go back to that LSU game, that was the game of the year at that point. What was that, week 3 or 4? Something like
LSU?
that. Yeah, LSU Ole Miss. That was the biggest game of the entire weekend.
Yeah.
And those two teams they were both sitting inside the top 10. And he goes in there and looks completely comfortable. I think he was the first quarterback in 30 years in the SEC to have 300 yards in like 4 games or something like that. And he just kind of looked at like, oh, whatever. And if this is what this race is supposed to be about, then it's like, okay, this is not some whatever I like situation right now. Right now, he is plus 4,000, right behind Diego Pavia and Jeremiah Love to win the Heisman. And that just doesn't even make any sense to me. And I'm looking at FanDuel right now, so I don't really know what that's about. I really wish he would get more love. I mean, I don't know if that Washington State game is like working against him for some reason, but that it just seems weird that a guy who, if he doesn't miss those first 2 games or just doesn't play in them, I shouldn't say miss, he doesn't play in those first. I mean, talking about a guy who could be approaching, he'd be closer to 3,000 yards
He'd be on
with
his
some of
he'd be
these
at
quarterbacks.
25, 26.
Yeah,
He'd also have another 200 yards on the ground, maybe 100 yards on the
and
ground.
he's not turning the ball over crazy. He's not fumbling. I would say that there are some points during drives or during possessions that some things just look not like fast, but it's like, okay, this guy, he's only 6 foot tall, so he's not like a huge statue sitting back there that can see over the field. But there are some moments where it's like, okay, he's playing his first year of high level Division 1, so like
And
he's gonna have some mistakes.
he will. But to me, it's like, who do you trust at quarterback more in the country than him? Like Marcel Reed is probably number two on that list. Diego Pavia's up there, but like who? Ty Simpson's up there. But who do you trust more than Trinidad Chambliss if you needed a game-winning drive? I felt this way about Bryce Young. I didn't think he'd be a great pro, but I was just like, the way he sees the field, Tua was the same way. It was just
Yeah.
like, buddy, don't give Tua the ball with any time left in college. Like, just don't do it. And he's shown out in the NFL. It's a different animal. We're not talking about that right now. But Trinidad Chambliss to me feels like the next version of those two guys. A little smaller on size, lefty, which is fine, but highly accurate, highly on time, and super slippery. Like he scrambles for like 10 or 15 yards, but it's just like, it's so crucial. 3rd and 8. And it's like slips out of what would be a sack into a 1st and 10 out of bounds. You're like,
doesn't take big hits
at all. So he's just got that thing about him that it just feels like, with a little more name brand recognition, this is kind of the Ole Miss thing, which is like if he was doing this at LSU, if he was doing this at Auburn, if he was doing this at Florida, he'd be number 1 on the list. Like we would have this conversation just between, more than just you and I are. So maybe the brand's kind of hurting him a little bit. The first 2 games not playing, hurting him a little bit being a D2 guy. But like everything else he has, like he even has a cool name that you're like, this could be anything. You could do a lot of things with this guy. So It's a shame that that the storyline of him is not more pronounced than Fernando Mendoza, who hasn't played a great deal of competition, Julian Sand, who hasn't played a great deal of competition. I think Fernando Mendoza they end up with just winning out. Like I don't think that's going to be. Actually, do they play Penn State coming up? I'm blanking that. That's going to be an interesting game for him. I'm not rooting against Indiana at all, and I would never bet against Kurt Cignetti ever again. I'll learn my lesson.
They played Penn State this weekend.
So it's like that's a game where it's going to be some of the best competition he's played against since Oregon and since Iowa. So he has that. Julian Saint has Michigan coming up. So like we'll see how they play against what I feel like are rosters that are comparable since they've been just beating the piss out of everybody else. So we'll see what they do. But in my opinion, to me, it goes to Trinidad Chambliss. He's first. Marcel Reed's probably second with what he's doing. And then everybody else is like, if you're going to go by stats, then go with Robertson at Baylor.
Toby Robertson, Baylor.
Why not? So I don't know.
That's a good point. So our Week 10 bets were pretty successful. I was riding really high until Georgia Tech decided to lay an egg against NC State. I should have seen it coming with how good my day was going. I was celebrating early. I was ready to get on TikTok and start talking more shit to people. And then NC State decides to play the best game they've played in like 3 years. NC State was 3-10 against the spread in their last 13 home games. They're giving up 440 yards a game, terrible in the red zone. Haynes King had been scoring on the ground in like 8 straight games, and then all of it just kind of fell flat. Now, Memphis 14.5 versus Rice. That game was on a Friday. That kind of was just one of those. I saw the spread against that one. Memphis had just lost to UAB. I'm like, nah, give me Memphis 14.5 playing with some vengeance. And then the Ohio State game against Penn State started off really interesting to me because Penn State still has the talent. Yes, their coaching has been eradicated, and who knows what's going to happen up north. But they played really well. Who was it? Singleton got into the end zone pretty early. And so it was like 10-7 for a really long time. And I'm sitting there like, okay, well, this spread's at 20.5. So it's like, yeah, it looks like Ohio State's going to win, but it might be an 8 or like a 13 or 14-point win, and I lose. Ohio State turns it up. Jeremiah Smith, I mean, he's running past double teams and catching the ball. Like, just unbelievable guy. He's the best player in college football. Cornell Tate, who's really stepped up and has not only made a name for Ohio State, but I think his draft stock, he's been one of the bigger risers in the country to me this year. I think that's a guy who he's definitely going in the second round. I don't know if he's a first-round guy because of what teams need in the trenches and at corner and at quarterback, but he's a guy who solidified himself as a second-round pick to me. One of those guys who could probably guarantee a contract in the second round or something like that. But losing the Georgia Tech 5.5 to NC State, that one really hurt me because I was really hoping to put together a 3-0 parlay, and Georgia Tech just kind of fell into that November college football trap where you're on the road, you're a top 10 team, you think you're about to coast until this Georgia game, and then here comes NC State putting up 40 points on you, and it ruined my Saturday. But let me know or tell the audience about your bets because I know you had more and you were a little bit more successful than me.
Yeah, your winning percentage was better than mine. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I had 10 bets over the weekend, and I'm going 6-4. I took some ones that we talked about previously. So I struck out on Miami -9.5, which is disgusting. Tennessee -2.5, just bizarre the way they played.
I would have never imagined them losing that game.
Me either. USC -4.5, ended up winning by 4. So it's disgusting. And then Georgia -6.5. And I knew Florida would come out and play spirited football. I knew that. I just thought they wouldn't do it the entire game. They had a chance to almost win the game, which is nuts. But then I had a couple over-unders too. So I ended up taking Ohio State. I got that number at 17.5. That one came down. So I wasn't sweating like you were. Texas made me sweat. -2.5. I got them. I had the Oklahoma-Tennessee game. I had the over, which is sitting at 56.5. I thought there was a great chance we'd see 62, low. 63 points. Yeah. So that one covered quite nicely. I had the USC-Nebraska under 59.5. And that one cashed too. I didn't think that those schools would score the way they were they were projected to, which was nice. Texas Tech -7.5. They made me sweat through the first half.
It did.
And then,
yes.
Ole Miss ended up pulling one out against South Carolina -11.5. So it ended up being quite successful. There are some interesting trends going on with this college football landscape and overall in college football. You start looking at how many possessions these teams are getting. It's starting to really skew the way that these lines end up going, where I'm looking at like Texas Vanderbilt as an example. And by the way, ESPN not being on YouTube TV is disgusting. They need to get that fixed. But I'm watching this, and Texas is doing a great job of limiting Vanderbilt in all areas. And then the fourth quarter comes around, and all of a sudden, like Texas can't get off the field fast enough on offense. They 3 and out. It's like, oh, okay. And then you look at what Vanderbilt's doing. They're scoring explosive play. And so the second half, it has been, I think, in my opinion, really hard to predict for a lot of these games. It's, I think, in my opinion, one of the reasons why not only betting is so hard, but projecting what these teams are and what they aren't is so difficult, because we get to the fourth quarter and all of a sudden, like, we get brand new football teams playing brand new styles of football. So there are a lot of things that I think we're going to end up seeing. The other trend I'm noticing that I think is just going to be more and more glaring is how many warm weather teams have to go and travel and play cold weather schools at their place. So we talked about Miami having to go to Virginia Tech and go to Pittsburgh. USC plays a Big Ten schedule, so it's going to be cold as hell where they go. We look at like teams having to travel up and play Mizzou. Like, that's going to be an interesting spot as well. Like, we look at the playoff and what that could mean. Like, we saw Tennessee have to go to Ohio State and just completely was checked out of the game. It was too cold for them. So, like, there are a couple things that I'm watching out for. I'm thinking, like, okay, conference realignment should probably happen because SMU has to travel, Cal has to travel. Like, these are warm schools that all of a sudden have to go play in frigid temperatures at different places. So, like, I'm just keeping an eye on that. When I'm looking at some of these bets coming up for the week, I want to keep an eye on what warm weather teams are playing cold weather teams. And if I don't see a clear line as to who was going to win, I'm certainly going to look at that over-under and probably take the under for that team's offensive production.
That's a good one. Yeah, we talk about a lot of wins and losses, but those point totals, they sit right there on those betting slips too, and those are really good ones to take. I haven't taken a point total since, who was it? Tennessee versus somebody. I think it was over 40.5 for Tennessee, and they scored like 38 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, the late November, or the really just November in general, when that calendar turns over, it really starts to get spooky for a lot of these teams going up north. And then you never know what type of weather you're going to get, because it could just be cold, but then throwing a little bit of snow, throwing a little bit of precipitation. And now you have a QB who's only thrown for 185, 210 yards, not the 280 to 300. And so if a team really doesn't have a running game like that, now you're talking about shorter possessions. You're talking about the cold weather team probably having longer possessions. That's when we saw Vanderbilt, that's how they were beating up on teams, was especially against LSU. They almost doubled the time of possession. And then they go and play somebody in cold weather, and they might look like the opposite team of production. And so that's a really good trend to look at. I really do like that. I'll probably have to, besides the only trend of what I've been watching for college football my whole life is when it starts to get to November, those top 10 teams that are playing against teams that are like at 500 and above, that still have something to kind of play for as far as conference championship, those are the games that you look at like, okay, those are upsets, but those lines, if they are outside of that 7.5, 8.5, I'd probably take the plus on that underdog, because those are not going to be blowout games, especially if you get a crowd that's really into it against a ranked opponent. So that means fans, students are showing up, and the team has something to play for other than their record being kind of trash. I think that's a really good trend to look at too. But the warm weather teams playing the cold weather is definitely something going to be moderating this weekend when I do look at my bets. And we talk about, what is it? Mizzou, Texas A&M?
Texas A&M.
Yeah, Mizzou, Texas A&M.
That's a spot.
That's a spot for sure. And you talk about 3 versus 19. I'm pretty sure the spread. I saw 7.5, and I've seen 5.5. I would lean more towards that 5.5, especially with Texas A&M traveling up. Now, Bo Prabula is not going to be playing. He got hurt. Dylan Raiola just got hurt. So those spreads are definitely going to be very interesting to watch. Zollers, we'll see how he plays against a team like that because he stepped in against Vanderbilt, but I think that Texas A&M speed is just a little bit different, and that team is a little bit more well coached, and they're going to be coming after his ass hard.
There are a couple spots that I'm watching. Texas A&M obviously coming up to Mizzou. I think it's going to be low 60s, high 50s, so it shouldn't be too big of a deal. I'm looking at Oregon going to Iowa. I think people have slept on Iowa this year, kind of what they've been doing. They've gradually been getting better as a football program. That's going to be a cold game. I'm looking at Washington going to Wisconsin. It's going to be a really cold game. So those are 2 ranked opponents going against 2 unranked Big Ten teams who I'm not sure kind of what to expect. And there was one more, Cal going to Louisville. Like, you look at that's a long track for them. And so if I'm looking at an over potentially a Jeff Brom team, I think I like the cover there as well. So there are a couple spots that as the schedules, start to play out, the year starts to play out, like we're going to start seeing some lines that don't make sense if you look at how these teams might compete based on where they're located and where they've been practicing all year. So.
Damn. Yeah. So, as we exit this episode, give me your prediction for BYU Texas Tech. I know you said it earlier in the show that you like Texas Tech, and then your result of Mizzou and Texas A&M, and then we'll close it out.
I like Texas Tech. I think they win the trenches. I think that BYU is not sneaking up on them. I think Texas Tech knows and understands what needs to be done. I think the way they played K-State the second half spoke to kind of the competitive character. As long as Baron Morton can play, team's going to be okay. So I like Texas Tech. I'm not sure what that spread is right now. I'm pretty sure I'm going to take Texas Tech to cover and win that game. It's also at home for them, so that'll be a fun one. Low-key, Lubbock, Texas is kind of cold when it gets this time of year, so we'll see how that plays for them. And then Mizzou hosting Texas A&M. This to me feels like if Texas A&M comes out and blasts Mizzou, they're for real. They can win that championship. If they don't, this is classic. Like you think you could take your foot off the pedal, and you never know. Mizzou, I believe they're off a bye. Am I right on this one?
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to be well prepared. They're going to be playing some of their best football. I think everything is on the line for Drinkwitz and this football program. I think you go from playoff contention to like all of a sudden you're going to be unranked if you lose this game. I expect a spirited approach. I think that Mizzou runs a different style of offense with Zollers at quarterback than they do Bo Prabula. I kind of felt like the freshman was pretty poised against Vanderbilt. He wasn't ready. He wasn't prepped. He wasn't like the game plan. So we'll see kind of what Texas A&M throws at him. But ultimately, I like the pass rush of A&M. I like their secondary speed. I think this comes down to them just being better in the trenches than Mizzou. And then I expect Marcel Reed to hit a couple over the top. And so I saw Mizzou play well against Vanderbilt, but they couldn't really punch it in, even with the starting quarterback. Mm-hmm. So I like Texas A&M to cover this one as well. I would take them probably -9 is kind of where I'm feeling. So anything below that would be super valuable, and I would certainly jump on that.
Yeah. And I'll touch on the coaching distraction thing because I think it's been a real thing. It hasn't caught up to Mizzou yet. At least I don't think, because the game against Vanderbilt, I expected them to lose. But if you look at Brent Key at Georgia Tech, that's a spot right there for him where he's been kind of distracted. He's been looming in a lot of these coaching searches, and I'm sure he has a big payday ahead of him if he wants it. Who is the other coach that's in? Matt Rule against USC doesn't look good, and then obviously his quarterback gets hurt, so that sucks. But those are 2 coaches right there who had a shot at getting to the Big Ten title game, and then the past 3 weeks, their coaches have been really the top candidates for these jobs, and now those coaches kind of look like, whatever. If you're just going to like lose out in your conference, then maybe that isn't the coach that we want.
By the way, Mizzou has not one but 2 coaches. You have Drink and Kirby Moore. Mm-hmm. So like in that Mizzou team, I believe Blake Baker of the LSU defense coordinator, who's been a star, was at Mizzou too. So Mizzou is not unfamiliar with these coaching like searches looming over their program. The question is you've got 2 guys now, and it looks like Kirby Moore is going to have an excellent chance to land a spot that he really wants. You've got 2 guys who are potentially looking at either getting large extensions and some guaranteed money, or you're looking at them taking a new job. And so is tricky. You also have a freshman quarterback who has to come in and play against probably one of the best teams, probably in my opinion, maybe right now the best team in the country. So you've got a lot riding, and if you lose this game, you roll out an egg. You're not very good. A lot of these things, like you come off these boards pretty quick. Like SEC is like, why would Auburn want drink? Why would Florida want drink? It's like, I don't know. I can't answer that question. Why would Kirby Moore deserve a spot if he can't at least put together a competitive game against a Texas A&M team that's playing good football? So there's a lot on the line for both of these guys. I expect them to coach pretty well, but those are two heavy distractions, and Kirby Moore's phone has only been blowing up more and more as these coaches get more fired.
That's a great point. We will end the show like that. Please like and subscribe. Like I said earlier, if you haven't, we are pumping out these episodes every single week. It's been really fun to watch. Also, college basketball is starting this week. I will be posting bets and parlays and all that on college basketball. I'm really going to be tuned in college basketball this year. There's a lot of talent on the floor. It's going to be a really good upcoming draft. The rookie class in the NBA is starting off really hot, and this class that's coming in after, we will talk about that. I will be making college basketball content this year. The NBA, it's fine. Like, I will make my content here and there, but I really feel like the lane of college this year in football and basketball is going to be really, really interesting. And there's a lot of movement that's going on. College basketball, which is good to me, is that there's a lot, it's more about the players still. College basketball coaches, those guys are locked in for a really long time. There's that movement. You're not really going to see it. Like, if this was college football, Bill Self would have probably already been fired. I mean, I can't even name all the guys that I would want to, but like, there's just a lot more on the line with football than there is in basketball. But I think that the focus on the players, there's guys that are sticking around more than just 1 year. There's a lot of talent that's going to be coming around. The NCAA tournament's going to be huge this year, and we're going to see some good basketball. So I will be making content about that, so tune in. But this is First and Cam, and we will see you guys later.